we've built the biggest podcasting network in Africa.
Yeah.
And what's interesting
Do
about
you think it's just in Africa? Are you aware of others elsewhere?
Yeah, we're working with other networks in Africa. There's some cool people doing cool stuff.
Not on the continent. I mean, maybe you guys are the biggest in the world?
No, in Africa.
No, I'm asking, are you aware of others outside of Africa?
Oh, loads. There's loads.
Okay. They're bigger than you guys.
In the rest of the world?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Amazon have one called Wondery. It's monstrous. SiriusXM is the biggest podcast network in the world. BBC is a podcast network.
Okay.
iHeartRadio.
Okay.
It's the biggest digital radio and podcast network also in the world. There are massive things happening in the rest of the world. And that's what's quite interesting is that, one of the advantages of going overseas is that some of those markets are already quite mature. So you can see where we're heading. We started late, starting these networks here.
Yeah.
And also what's happened now in the last few months is not only do we represent our we've actually changed the whole business model. We represent our podcasters. We're also representing podcasters who are not in our network.
Sure.
And we also now represent the BBC, Amazon, SiriusXM, and Acast, their global network in Africa.
Okay.
And that's been really cool. And a lot of that is because it's something we spoke about on the last one, but the idea that we need to be collaborating, that there's really big opportunities and we can't work in silos. So we've actually changed our model from being like a network to actually like a vehicle that's we're really working on growing our family and opportunities for the whole of the continent, because we're now making the connecting dots in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And they're all looking here and they don't know how to access it. And the reason they don't know how to access it is because we're all working in silos.
Oh.
So did they call Penn? Did they call MacG? Who did they call? And because there's more infrastructure in the rest of the world, they can go to a large network and start working with them. And they can't do that here. So we're sort of combining forces with all of the smaller networks and the other networks to say, on top of us, to say, why don't we all work together to build? This is a very long, boring version of what we do. We're a podcast network. That part's only interesting to me, I think. But
no, it's interesting to a lot of people. I wanted to ask, who is the African Podcast Network? There are people who are going to be listening, are going to be like, I also want to be a part of it. So where do I go?
So the problem is with us is, first of all, we're like in the same way that a record label like Sony Records or Universal, they're not really public facing. So you're not out searching for APN. Our job is to support the podcasters we work with and not get in the way of them.
Sure.
So we're not looking for Penn to go out there and start promoting the Africa Podcast Network. And the other thing, and this is earlier on, we were talking about the sort of more corporatization of what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And one of the new developments we've done, fortunately / unfortunately, is that when we first started the Africa Podcast Network, we had dreams of being like a record label where we find new talent and we develop that talent and we take that talent to market. But that really backfired for us. And we've actually ended up working with and signing some incredible talent, some of the biggest names you can think of. And it hasn't translated well into the podcasting space for a few reasons. Availability, enthusiasm, and actually just because you got 100 million followers or even 1 million followers on Instagram or TikTok, it doesn't translate to your pod. As you know, that you are the zeitgeist, you are creating connection, right?
Let them know, John.
But what you're doing is it's not a given. Like you've got the recipe, and so we've lost so much time ground by working with podcasters we love and changed the strategy to only work with podcasters who already are doing well.
Okay.
And the reason is because podcasters who are doing well, their biggest struggle is understanding the monetization chain and access to capital. Yeah. Second of all, we're a tiny team doing really big work. And so why not focus on the commercial aspect? Sure. It's a win-win. And if we're sitting with podcasters who have really great potential and we're working with them and they're not making any money because we can't sell their podcast because they haven't got enough of an audience, they start getting upset with us. Like, where's all the promises? Where's all the things? So we've actually sort of built this. We're a premium network and are super selective about who we work with.
Okay.